Today we're going to look at a destroyer match played in hard mode. You'll see what I mean as the battle develops. We're playing the legendary tier German destroyer Z-52. I completed the Bureau project to acquire the ship not too long ago, but I haven't played it much since because they keep updating the game and adding things like new campaign ships and new premiums for various types of purchase. And so I play those ships to cover them on YouTube and such. And sometimes things like the Z-52 Bureau project completion go by the wayside. But I was playing a series of cruisers and battleships last night, trying to record footage for a game that I could put on YouTube, and I kept losing, in large part thanks to poor destroyer play, which is always something that's a problem in World of Warships Legends. But it got me thinking about the video I made yesterday talking about the virtues of kiting, and some of the responses I got to that video. Not that they were combative or harsh or anything, but it just seems to me like a lot of people love to complain about passivity in World of Warships Legends. I feel like I'm the only one who I ever see complain too much about reckless, unchecked aggression. I want to make the point, and let me know if you disagree with me, but I think I'm pretty much spot on with this take. Unchecked aggression and unmitigated passivity are two sides of exactly the same useless coin in World of Warships Legends. Either you can be completely passive, sail into your spawn, and accomplish nothing for the full duration of the battle, and then only push out once the battle has been decided, get a little damage, and sink. To be sure, that happens a lot in this game, and that is annoying. But something else that happens frequently too, that I see very few people complain about, is ships aggressively and recklessly pushing in. It's almost like a good portion of the community sees aggression as inherently good, divorced from context. And it's not that way. If, for example, I were to push straight into this alpha cap right in front of me, obviously there's a destroyer in there. He's just flipped it, and as a destroyer, I recognize it is my job to play the objectives, but I can do that with a little bit of patience. If I push straight in here, I do have an advantage over the destroyer, probably. I don't think there's anything in this match except a Z-46 that's also got sonar, and I don't think it's the Z-46 in this cap. But if I get spotted by that destroyer, I've got that DD to shoot at me, I've got Montana over there, and I've got Alaska out there. He's got radar. He's the reason we didn't initially push into the cap, because if we had, he would have seen that the cap was contested or starting to turn red from his point of view, and then he would have deployed the radar and caught us for about 30 seconds. In those 30 seconds, he, the Montana, and that Yamato out there, along with whatever DD this is, could have shot at us, and we would have lost all our HP instantly. We would have gone back to port without flipping this cap, and we would have had to load into the next match. We would have contributed nothing to the outcome of the battle for our team, except making it harder for them to win. And of course, we pushed into the cap late now. We're a couple seconds from flipping it, but nobody's managed to take out the Alaska or deal damage to him in any kind of significant way. So he does catch us in the radar. I'm trying to hold on to the cap, maybe a little bit too greedily. And there we deploy the smoke screen, sort of mistiming things, but Alaska's radar runs out a few moments later, and now we're concealed inside of the smoke, but we've lost almost half of our HP in that single engagement. So again, imagine if I had just pushed recklessly into this cluster of enemy ships and sunk. It might seem obvious to many of you out there that you shouldn't do that, and yet I see it happen every single day when I play this game. Again, unchecked aggression is bad. Unchecked passivity is bad. You have to strike a balance between the two and know when you can push in and when you cannot. Generally speaking, regardless of what class you're playing, even destroyers, if you are facing a numbers disadvantage, as we are, frankly, we're the only ones here along with this battleship that's next to the island. If you're facing that kind of numbers disadvantage, that is not the time you push. Now, if you're facing a numbers advantage, then that's a much better time to consider pushing. And those situations will develop dynamically as a game goes on. Sometimes you'll have the numbers disadvantage, so you won't be able to push. Sometimes you'll have the opposite, and you will be able to, and that will change several times throughout the course of the match. There is an ebb and flow to this game. And again, unchecked aggression, unmitigated passivity, both of them are two sides of the same useless coin. It's the balance that you want to find. And so we flipped the cap. Khabarovsk is hiding inside of a smokescreen outside of the cap, and we've still got Art Musashi, which I think I just misidentified as Yamato, and Alaska out there somewhere. We've taken the cap, though, and so there's no reason to push into the enemy's spawn. Another thing I see destroyers do. Other destroyers that spawn on this flank and succeed in taking this cap as I have, they might be inclined to push into the enemy's spawn so that they can try to get torpedoes on some of these battleships. That's a recipe for demise. Alaska's still out there, still on more or less full HP. He might as well be. And there's literally nothing on my team that's going to shoot him from this angle. The friendly battleship has retreated behind the island, which honestly is not a bad move for him if he pushes out in front of the Alaska, the Musashi, the Montana, and the other battleship out there. Well, he's also going to go back to port pretty quickly too, so he's got to play a little bit more passively and defensively and wait for the enemy team to push into him. I might be positioning a little bit differently if I were him, but in theory or in principle, I don't think there's anything especially wrong with what he's doing because we have the objective secured. And so therefore, there's no reason to push into the enemy team from this angle when we have a disadvantage. Instead, we're going to sail back toward the center and see if we can't find one of the two remaining enemy DDs. We've still got 2 charges of the sonar, and you know what? Right on cue, there's one of the 2 enemy DDs. It's our old friend the Khabarovsk, who looks like he is potentially going in for the YOLO run against the Montana. A little bit disappointing to see. That is not where the Khabarovsk excels, at least not in my opinion. We get spotted shooting at the Khabarovsk, and things are going to start going south pretty quickly. Kaba lands some hits. Alaska comes around the corner. Pretty much everybody's landing hits on us now. And on top of all that, there's the Z-46 out there, the predecessor, I suppose you could say, to the Z-52. So we immediately stop firing our guns because we know if we continue to fire, we'll continue to be spotted. But if we stop firing, well, then we go dark after about 20 seconds. And so we do. Now, we could still sink here very easily. We finally turned on hard mode. We've only got 259 HP, and 1 shell from 1 ship of any kind is going to be enough to send us back to port. Thankfully, Alaska goes down, courtesy of the friendly Montana. If that guy hadn't taken the Alaska out, I think our torpedoes would have. So all is well. And now the enemy team is down 3 ships to our 1. But the point situation is still pretty close. You know, it's within 100 points, or it was until the enemy team lost their Montana over there. Now they're down 4 ships, but this is still anybody's game. Now the Z-46 is a bit of a scary opponent. Like me, he has got a smoke sonar combo, although I don't think his sonar spots ships from as long of range as the Z-52's. Z-52, I want to say, has a 6-kilometer ship detection range, whereas Z-46 might have upper 5 km range, maybe not quite 6, or maybe it does. I could just be misremembering. Take all of that with a grain of salt. But in any case, the question is, what do we do in this scenario? Well, we know that we've got an enemy Montana somewhere north of the Alpha Cap. He's going to start pushing in that way, and I was thinking we might want to go and try to get torpedoes on him to defend the cap. But alternatively, we could go for Bravo. That's where the Z-46 was last spotted, and there is the potential that we'll be able to catch him out in the sonar. And that's what we're going to try to do. Of course, it's a huge risk. If the Z-46 sees us and shoots us once, then our game is over. And we don't want the game to be over necessarily. We've lost 2 more ships in the time I've been talking. So it's 5v4 or 6v5 in favor of the blue team. We have an advantage, and we have a caps advantage. That's not going to last for too much longer as the Montana goes into Alpha and remains completely uncontested. He'll be able to flip that, and that means the enemies are going to hold both Alpha and Bravo. Meanwhile, we've got the friendly Shimakaze on the other side of the map in Charlie, who succeeded in taking that cap, and he's got maybe 2 battleships sailing straight into him, which does put him at a good advantage, but he's not got a lot of HP either. So if he gets spotted, he's probably sunk as well. Anyway, I think with all his torpedo firepower, he can probably hold back those enemy battleships if they want to push. And it's clear now, from where the RPF indicator is pointing, that the Z-46 is in the vicinity. There are his torpedoes. We've deployed the sonar preemptively to get spot of them, and good thing we did. That first set of torpedoes might have hit us otherwise. But now, we'll slowly approach the cap, and there, we catch the Z-46 with the 6KM sonar, and we're going to smoke up. We're going to shoot at him. Hopefully, he doesn't have sonar on cooldown to spot us, but it doesn't matter. Our spotting allows the friendly battleship to take out the Z-46. GG on the friendly battleship's part. Again, in a destroyer, unchecked aggression is a bad thing. You want to be alive in a destroyer more than any other class for the full duration of the game. Because even if you're playing a destroyer where you've got 259 HP and you can't get spotted or you sink, your options might be severely limited because of the lack of HP, but you can still spot ships, you can still take caps, and if you're in a destroyer with at least decent torpedo range like the Z-52, you can still torpedo enemy ships. There's the Musashi, who apparently wasn't aware that a destroyer was right in front of him. Otherwise, I hope he wouldn't have pushed out from behind that island there, but he does. He takes 4 torps, and that sends him back to port. He tries in vain to get a blind fire hit on us and doesn't succeed, thankfully. If he had gotten lucky there, we certainly would have sunk. But now, only 3 ships are left alive on the red team. The Montana in the Alpha Cap, and the 2 battleships trying to push into the Shimakaze there. Shimakaze is kind of making me nervous. He's got his back to that rock there, and if either of those 2 battleships gets close enough to spot him, which is at least a possibility in that position, well, then he's going back to port, and if that were to happen, and let's say I had just aggressively pushed into the Z-46, got spotted and sunk myself, well, then we'd have no destroyers, and it would be 2 battleships and a cruiser versus 3 enemy BBs. Things could very easily go the other way. But Shimakaze takes out Yamato. There's only 1 battleship left over there. I'm pretty sure Shima's going to take that guy out too. And that just leaves the enemy Montana. So it's mostly just going to be a question of who is going to get to sink the enemy Montana. He's decided that he's going to push into our teammate over there who is requesting support. We've got a Conqueror in the center of the map who's turning back around to try to get some shots on the Montana. And we're going to sail into position and see if we can't get a couple more torpedo hits just to increase the damage numbers a little bit. We've only done 116,000 damage up until this point, which is not especially impressive. But in a destroyer, I don't think dealing a raw, huge damage total number matters all that much. What matters much more is the 2 capture circles we've taken and the spotting that we've provided for the friendly team, including the spotting that got the last enemy DD, the Z-46, sunk. That's the real value of a destroyer and why you want one alive for the full duration. They're stealthy, so they're the eyes and ears of the team, and they're the most efficient at taking the objectives. Plus, they can deal damage to ships from stealth with things like torpedoes. Speaking of which, it's only going to take 1 torpedo to send the Montana back to port and end this match with our victory. A lot of that is because, again, we engaged in some at least fairly decent destroyer play here. But my main point, I guess, is that unchecked aggression and unchecked passivity are 2 sides of the same coin. Both should be avoided, and both should be deployed only in the right context. Well, I guess if they're deployed in the right context, then they're not unchecked aggression or unmitigated passivity. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.